Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Can anyone not hear me in the back? Raise your hand if you can't. Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to this very important event that we've been planning for months. And we're very excited for what's going to happen. My name is Claude Potts, and I'm the Romance Languages Librarian in the library. I'm just going to talk a little bit about this exhibit if some of you don't know so much about it. And let's see. So let's see. Has anyone heard of 3%? Nope. I'm not talking about 1%. 3%. It is it's a website. It's a web resource established in University of Rochester in 2007. And it's affiliated with Open Letter Press. And it gets its name from the fact that around 3% of the books published in the United States are translations, which is incredibly fewer than most other countries. So to bring attention to this fact, they named themselves 3%. And they are a resource that promotes international scholarship and from other languages and so forth. For more than 150 years, Berkeley scholars have across disciplines have refused to just work with what is 3%, what has been translated, and instead they've immersed themselves in the 97%. So this is something that I think distinguishes Berkeley from many universities. So from the very beginning, it's hard to say who was actually our first overseas book dealer. But in 1880, the university hired a well-known dealer in Paris. His name was Charles Ferdinand Reinwald, to procure publications from Europe. It's 1880, so about 14 years after the university was founded. So this is, on the record, maybe you could find another book dealer, overseas book dealer. But this was kind of reflected the needs of the faculty and the students. Berkeley scholars have brought into the world as translators, brought into the English-speaking world. We have Robert Hass, known for bringing the Polish poetry of Czesław Miłosz into English. We have Robert Alter, who's translated parts of the Hebrew Bible. The entire Hebrew Bible. Okay, thank you. We have here today. We have Sally and Robert Goldman, who have translated the epic poem, the Ramayana of Valmiki. Over 30 years of work translating this. We actually have it on the table in the middle there. We call that the McSweeney's table. If some of you are familiar with the publishing house in San Francisco, McSweeney's, we usually have on that table all the publications of that publishing house. But for tonight, we cleared the table and we filled it with books, many books that are in the exhibit. Some of these are actually books that were scanned by Google or the Internet Archive or even in-house. The very items that are now shared with the entire world. Quite incredible. When you see these modest objects, it's and then we brought out other works in different languages. I hope you can look at after all of the talks. I'm going astray from my script here, but I will move on. So I would say, and part of what this exhibit celebrates is that the linguistic diversity of our collections. Approximately 36% of the collection is in non-English languages. And this, I would argue, is what makes Berkeley and its libraries one of the best among the best in the world, at least public universities. The library mirrors and responds to the research and teaching that takes place on campus. All of you actually play a part in building the collection we have by using it or making requests. the books, the journals, the films, newspapers, primary sources, and even the electronic resources. But maintaining such an international collection is not an easy thing in these times when the price of in the time of diminishing resources and actually higher costs for everything from binding to cataloging, etc. Okay, so I'd like to, this exhibit came to mind actually 3 years ago, and it, when we discovered that the exhibit software wasn't quite enough, we wanted to have essays or entries talking about the languages and the works that were featured, and the exhibit software could only handle a couple sentences. So we moved on to using WordPress, and in a way it changed the nature of the exhibit, and for those of you that have been following it, we've been launching one language every Monday for the last year, and work. And so we expect to do that for another 3 or 4 months, and then the exhibit will reach completion. The choice of the languages is largely based on those languages that are supported by the Berkeley Language Center. There's 59 of those this year. That fluctuates from year to year. So we did include languages that have been taught in the past as well, and even languages that individual scholars might be working with. So we'll reach completion with about 70 or so. Of course, 70 languages, it's not 5,000, which is the number of distinct languages that are in the world, but it's a pretty impressive list of languages. Obviously, the collection has more than that. It lacks many important works or languages, this exhibit. We do not have any Native American languages in the exhibit, so I welcome anyone out there to write an entry for example, Chocheño, the language of Berkeley. Before Berkeley was known as Berkeley, this is the Ohlone language. There are about, I'd say about 7 or 8 languages from sub-Saharan Africa, where 1/3 of the world's languages come from. So there's a little bit missing from the exhibit, but it shows some of the strengths of Berkeley and languages and interests. So I'd just like to thank everyone who's contributed to this exhibit. There were at least 45 contributors so far, and about more than half of you are here tonight. So you're all wearing gold name tags. So when we get to the end of the readings, I encourage you to talk with one another and ask that person what they did in the exhibit. And so I'd like, very, very happy for it. Everyone contributed. Also thankful to Library Communications, who actually hosted the exhibit, and we used our customized version of WordPress to do that. They've also promoted the exhibit, and they devised the beautiful logo, which if you haven't noticed, and next time you're in Free Speech Movement Cafe, you will see the larger version of the logo that one of the designers in the communications office designed. And each piece of the fan is actually a work that has been digitized and is in the exhibit. So it's great. Thanks to the communications office. Also, of course, like to thank the library as well as my own division, the Arts and Humanities Division. Many of you contributed to this exhibit, but you're also contributing to the reception right now. So if you look around, yeah, thank you. I would also like to thank the Berkeley Language Center and for supporting this from the very beginning as a co-sponsor. Particularly to Rick Kern. Thanks for everything. Where is Rick? Sitting back there? Okay. For everything you do to promote the study of languages at Berkeley. And thanks especially to Judith Butler for giving the lecture following the readings. It's an honor to have her here, and very fitting as she begins this 2020 as president of the Modern Languages Association. And last but not least, I'd like to thank all of the 10 individuals who are doing the readings tonight. I will introduce you one by one as you come up, and it's great to have you guys reading. And so I would like to invite the University Librarian and Chief Digital Scholarship Officer Jeff MacKie-Mason to come up and give some opening remarks. Thank you.
Tak, Claude. God dag, hej då. Jag heter Jeff MacKie-Mason. It's been so long since I lived and studied in Sweden that almost exhausts my knowledge of the language, but I thought might as well use it. It's a good opportunity. The Berkeley Library has a long history of collecting non-English language materials from every corner of the globe, reflecting the university's early aspirations to become a leading center of learning. To illustrate the extent of our collections, Claude made a couple of remarks about this. Over 1/3 of our collection volumes are in non-English languages. That's almost 5 million volumes that we have at Berkeley that are in languages other than English. We have over 400 languages represented in our print collections. And we add more volumes in about 50 languages every year. Of course, the majority of our English language holdings can be found in many other collections in the US. But the same is not true of all of our foreign language collections. These draw researchers and scholars from across the nation and overseas as a result, enriching our community by their presence. Our non-English collection has been growing since the founding of the campus. As one example, Berkeley's holdings in East Asian languages began in the 1890s with John Fryer's deposit of his personal library of over 2,000 volumes in Chinese to the campus. These volumes formed the core of what is now the East Asian Library's collections, where today we hold the largest collection of Japanese language materials in among North American research libraries. We have the second largest Chinese language collection and the 5th largest Korean collection. Of course, the Berkeley Library's foreign language collections are just one of the library's great strengths, but they're very distinctive and very important. For many scholars, they distinguish Berkeley from a number of competing research universities as a place to do research and to teach. They also compose an extraordinarily valuable asset that signifies Berkeley's global, non-parochial ideals. It's with our great delight to welcome you here this evening. We're so happy to have a full room and have representatives from so many parts of campus and from so many languages. It's really terrific to have you here. I really appreciate that. I'm not going to take any more of your time because we have a really interesting program, and I'm going to let Claude introduce the first reader. Thank you for being here.
Okay, these are, I don't know if this expression is popular outside of the library. We have things called lightning talks, which are talks that are about 5 or 7 minutes, but we're going to have sort of lightning readings, so these will be about 5-minute readings in original languages. And the reason we put so much effort in creating a program tonight was so that you could follow along in English if you didn't speak these 9 languages that you're going to be hearing for the next 40 minutes. The first reader is my colleague in the library, Virginia Shih, and she'll be reading in Vietnamese. She is the curator for the Southeast Asia collection in the Southeast Asia Library.
Thank you, Claude. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to share with you an excerpt of Gil this evening. Gil, or The Tale of Gil, by Nguyen Du, is highly regarded as the national masterpiece of pre-modern Vietnamese literature of the early 19th century in Vietnam. This narrative poem was based on the plot of a 17th century Chinese novel, Jin Yun Qiao. It recounts the vicissitudes of a beautiful and talented lady who sacrificed herself for her family. The work transmits the social and political turmoil in Vietnam toward the end of the 18th century. Written in 3,254 lines, the entire poem was composed in a 6/8 verse in a couplet form of 6 syllables in the first line and 8 syllables in the second line. The following is the excerpt of the first 6 lines of the prologue of Jeroen, originally written in ideographic Southern script, known as Chinom. It was transliterated into modern Vietnamese Romanized script, known as Quốc ngữ. Trăm năm trăm cõi người ta, chữ tài chữ mịch, khéo là ghét nhau, trải qua một cuộc bẻ dâu, những điều trông thấy mà đâu đến lòng, lạ gì vị sắc tư phong, rời sân quen thói, má hồng đánh ghen. This poem was translated into English by the late Vietnamese American scholar Huỳnh San Thông. 100 years in this lifespan on earth, talent and destiny are apt to fail. You must go through a play of ebb and flow and watch such things as make you sick at heart. Is it so strange that losses balance gains, blue heavens want to strike a rose from spite? Thank you very much for your attention.
Our next reader is Ahmad Diab, and he is assistant professor in the Department of Near Eastern Studies.
Hello everyone, marhaba. This poem is titled قافية من أجل المعلقات, and rhyme for the odes. Mu'allaqat, of course, is a reference to the oldest, most revered poetry in Arabic, pre-Islamic poetry. This is a poem by Mahmoud Darwish, one of Arabic's foremost poets. It comes from a volume published in 1995 entitled "Why Did You Leave the Horse Alone?" لماذا تركت الحصان وحيدا? A question posed by the poet as a child to his father as they fled from their now ethnically cleansed Galilean village Al-Birwe and made their way to become refugees in Lebanon, as they bid farewell to once and for all to what used to be Palestine, and managed to return to what would become an oppressively monolingual Israeli rule. Darwish would later remark, as a 30-year-old arriving in Cairo, at the banality and felicity of being able to speak Arabic freely, where names of shops, names of streets were Arabic. And here, in this volume, it's an autobiographical attempt written in poetic form to reflect at the place of poetry in time of divinely supported prose that becomes triumphant, as the poet has it. So here goes. قافية من أجل المعلقات. ما دلني أحد علي. أنا الدليل إلي بين البحر والصحراء. من لغتي ولدت على طريق الهند بين قبيلتين صغيرتين عليهما قمر الديانات القديمة. والسلام المستحيل، وعليهما أن تحفظ فلك الجوار الفارسي وهاجز الروم الكبير ليهبط الزمن الثقيل عن خيمة العربي أكثر. من أنا؟ هذا سؤال الآخرين ولا جواب له. أنا لغتي، وأنا معلقتان 10. هذه لغتي، أنا لغتي. أنا ما قالت الكلمات كن، جسدي فكنت لنبرها جسدا. أنا ما قلت للكلمات كوني ملتقى جسدي مع الأبدية الصحراء. كوني كي أكون كما أقول. لا أرض فوق الأرض تحملني، فيحملني كلامي طائرا متفرعا مني، ويبني عش رحلته أمامي في حطام العالم السحري حولي. على ريح وقفت وطال بي ليلي الطويل. هذه لغتي، قلائد من نجوم حول أعناق الأحبة. هاجروا، أخذوا المكان وهاجروا، أخذوا الزمان وهاجروا، أخذوا روائحهم عن الفخار والكلأ الشحيح وهاجروا، أخذوا الكلام وهاجر القلب القتيل معهم. أيتسع الصدى، هذا السراب الأبيض الصوتي لاسم تملأ المجهول بحته ويملأه الرحيل ألوهة؟ تضع السماء علي نافذة فأنظر، لا أرى أحدا سواي. وجدت نفسي عند خارجها كما كانت معي، ورؤاي لا تنأى عن الصحراء، من ريح ومن رمل خطاي، وعالمي جسدي وما ملكت يداي. أنا المسافر والسبيل، يطل آلهة علي ويذهبون، ولا نطيل حديثنا عما سيأتي. لا غد في هذه الصحراء إلا ما رأينا أمس. فلأرفع معلقتي لينكسر الزمان الدائري ويولد الوقت الجميل. ما أكثر الماضي يجيء غدا. تركت لنفسها نفسي التي امتلأت بحاضرها، وأفرغني الرحيل من المعابد. للسماء شعوبها وحروبها، أما أنا فلي الغزالة زوجة، ولي النخيل معلقات في كتاب الرمل. ماض ما أرى للمرء مملكة الغبار وتاجه، فلتنتصر لغتي على الدهر العدو، على سلالاتي، علي، على أبي، وعلى زوال لا يزول. هذه لغتي ومعجزتي، عصا سحري، حدائق بابلي، ومسلتي، وهويتي الأولى، ومعدني الصقيل، ومقدس العربي في الصحراء يعبد ما يسيل من القوافي كالنجوم على عباءته، ويعبد ما يقول. لابد من نثر إذن، لابد من نثر إلهي لينتصر الرسول. Thank you.
Our next reader is Yael Haver from the Department of German, and she is reading in Yiddish.
Thank you, Claude. Thank you to the library and to all that went into organizing this very fascinating exhibit. I'll be reading a selection from a Yiddish writer. I'd like to say a few words about Yiddish first. Yiddish is actually a very conversational language, and the selection I'll be reading is, as you'll find out, is extremely conversational. You have the translation in the booklet. Yiddish is a 1,000-year-old language of European Jews known as Ashkenazis. It's written from right to left in Hebrew characters. It's derived from German and it includes many Hebraic and Slavic elements. It's used for everyday purposes, as well as for a rich variety of religious and secular literature, ranging from medieval times to the 21st century. Most Yiddish users and writers were annihilated during the Holocaust of World War II, yet the language continues to thrive in the United States, Europe, Israel. Those are the main places. It thrives in other parts of the world as well. Arguably, the best-known Yiddish writer, from whom I'm going to read a selection, is known as Sholem Aleichem. His name was Sholem Rabinovich, born in Ukraine in 1859, died in the United States in 1916. He was a founding father of modern Yiddish literature. He was a supreme humorist, and he created the literary persona of Sholem Aleichem. Now, the name Sholem Aleichem in Yiddish means it's a greeting. It's more or less, how are you? Or nice to see you. Sholem Aleichem, everyone. So this writer, Sholem Rabinovich, created a series of stories, plays, essays, humoresques, monologues. He was extremely prolific. And in a variety of genres, he invented or gave voice to modern Jewish archetypes, myths, and fables of unique imaginative power and universal appeal. Sholem Aleichem's Tevye stories provided the basis of the popular musical Fiddler on the Roof, which its most recent appearance was actually in Yiddish, taking the language of the Tevye stories and presenting the musical in Yiddish. Sholem Aleichem founded a publishing house in Kiev in 1888 to encourage writers that he admired and to identify new talent. I'm going to be reading a selection from one of his stories about a fictional village, the village of Kasrilivke. These stories were written in the 1900s. They are satirical, yet very warm and compassionate. The poverty-stricken residents of Kasrilivke aspire to modernity. They're plagued by backwardness, but they continue to dream of redemption. Following Sholem Aleichem's death in 1916, multi-volume editions of his collected works were published widely. So on the table over there is a 1919 edition, printed in the Yiddish spelling prevalent at the time, with transliterations of Germanic linguistic elements. At that time, Yiddish was considered a jargon, not a true language. And so the Yiddish, the transliteration of Germanic elements might have been intended to confer some kind of legitimacy on it. The story Fires, from which this selection is taken, underlines the lack of actual progress in the fictional town of Kasrilivke, which prides itself on striving for modernity. In this section, the selection that I'll be reading, there's the voice of the horse. And so Sholem Aleichem's unique talent was to give voice to characters who usually are not represented. The horse, there's a fire in the town. The abused horse is in the middle of this municipal crisis, and his side expressing the horse is really typical of the creative, plain-spoken genius that made Sholem Aleichem so popular. In Berkeley, we've been offering courses in Yiddish language and literature and culture for over 20 years in the German department and as part of the Jewish Studies minor of the program in Jewish Studies. We've had several conferences on Yiddish literature over the years. And I would be happy to talk with anyone who's interested in Yiddish or in studying Yiddish or really anything related to Yiddish. So I'm reading in Yiddish and you have a translation. I've started with a kind of epigraph which is the beginning of the whole Kasrilivke cycle. Der größere Weltprogress hat sich hineingehabt und hat übergedreht die Stadt mit dem Kopf herab, mit den Füßen rauf. And here's the cart driver trying the fire engine, as it were. Very disappointed. An einschrumpfen ist, wen hat gekonnt der Reus der Zappen, eingesunken soll werden. Oh, brennen sollst du Schmassel auf dem Feuer. Und gronem der lang dem Pferd a Ruck mit dem Beitsteckel in Seite rein. Das Pferdl tut a Pintel mit die Augen, lässt darauf die Morde, guckt an der Seite und tracht sich, vor was kommt mir a Steiger oder der Setz? Glatt genommen und gebuchet sich. Es ist nicht kein Kunst, nehmen ein Pferd, a stumme Zunge und schlagen ihm siehst und nicht. And I could go on and on. It turns into a sad farce, but I've chosen this selection that is sort of representative of some of Shalom Aleichen's talents and the multifaceted nature of Yiddish literature. Thank you.
And my long-winded welcome. I forgot to mention that the one goal of the exhibit is to give all languages equal space, because we know in the world they don't all have equal space. So in the exhibit you will find not only modern languages, but ancient languages and less commonly taught languages and languages that are endangered. The next reader is Jeroen Dewulf, who is the director of the Institute of European Studies, also the interim director of the Institute of International Studies, as well as professor in Queen Beatrix Professor in the Department of German and Dutch Studies. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Claude. The book I selected for you is Max Havelaar. It's a classic in Dutch literature, published in 1860. It's a classic because it's considered one of the first major works in European literature where you have a very critical perspective on Europe's colonial policy. It was written by a man who used the pen name Multatuli, meaning it's Latin for I who suffered a lot, an allusion to what he experienced during the time he lived in the Dutch East Indies, so today's Indonesia, where he as a young man wanted to change everything only to find out that his superiors were not at all open for change and ultimately forced him out and forced him to dismiss. And his revenge was this novel, an autobiographical novel called Max Havelaar. A novel that has three major characteristics that I would like to highlight, each with a short passage. The first characteristic is that it's extremely well written. He's definitely a master of irony, and he uses this irony in the beginning of the novel by introducing a character who he profoundly dislikes. It's a coffee broker, a businessman who only cares about money and who looks down upon people who write books, because for him writing books is just a waste of time. A second characteristic of the book is a very interesting attempt by the author to let the voice of the native people be heard. So he has chapters where he draws heavily on local folklore, uses a lot of original languages to create kind of a local atmosphere where he tries to present the local point of view. And last but not least, the book is very interesting in its conclusion, because at the very end of the novel, the author all of a sudden enters the book and he pushes aside the narrators. And he tells you, I only wrote this novel to kind of draw you into the story, but this is not entertainment. This is a book with which I wanted to change the world. And I actually despise literature, He compares literary authors to prostitutes who sell themselves, and he doesn't want to be like that. He wants to change the world. Or as his critics would say, he wants to be a second Jesus Christ. But that's a whole other story. So let me read three sections. The first one is the beginning of the novel. Ik ben een makelaar in koffie en ik woon op de Lauriergracht nummer 37. Het is mijn gewoonte niet romans te schrijven of zulke dingen. Het heeft dan ook lang geduurd voordat ik ertoe overging een paar riem papier extra te bestellen en het werk aan te vangen dat gij, lieve lezer, zo even in de hand hebt genomen. En dat gij lezen moet als ge makelaar in koffie zijt of als ge iets anders zijt. Niet alleen dat ik nooit iets schreef wat naar een roman geleek, maar ik hou er zelfs niet van iets dergelijks te lezen, omdat ik een man van zaken ben. Sedert jaren vraag ik mij af waartoe zulke dingen dienen en ik sta verbaasd over de onbeschaamdheid waarmee een dichter of romanverteller u iets op de mouw durft spelden dat nooit gebeurd is en meestal niet gebeurd zijn kan. Als ik mijn vak, ik ben makelaar in koffie en ik woon op de Lauriergracht nummer 37 aan een principaal. Een principaal is iemand die koffie verkoopt, in een opgave deed waarin maar een klein gedeelte der onwaarheden voorkwam die in gedichten en romans de hoofdzaak uitmaken, zou hij terstond Busselings en Waterman nemen. Dat zijn ook makelaars in koffie, doch hun adres behoeft gij niet te weten. Ik pas er dus wel op dat ik geen roman schrijf of andere valse opgaven doe. So let me now switch to the second characteristic. I wanted to highlight him trying to present a native point of view. He does so in the very famous story of Saija and Adinda, two native children who have a buffalo. They're very proud of their buffalo. And then the colonial authorities take away their buffalo and you see them suffering. So just the beginning of that story. Seija's vader had een buffel, waarmede hij zijn veld bewerkte. Toen deze buffel hem was afgenomen door het districthoofd van Parangpujang, was hij zeer bedroefd en sprak geen woord vele dagen lang, want de tijd van ploegen was nabij. Het was te vrezen, als men de sawa niet tijdig bewerkte, dat ook de tijd van zaaien zou voorbijgaan. En eindelijk dat er geen padi zou te snijden zijn, om die te bergen in de lombong van het huis. And now a very short section from the conclusion of the novel. So all of a sudden the readers are totally surprised. The author enters the book, he pushes aside the narrators and he takes the word and he essentially then concludes with the famous sentence, I want to be read. So let me just read that section. Ja, ik multatuli, die veel gedragen heb. Neem de pen op. Ik vraag geen verschoning voor de vorm van mijn boek. Die vorm kwam mij geschikt voor ter bereiking van mijn doel. Dit doel is tweeledig. Ik wilde in de eerste plaats het aanzien geven aan iets dat als heilige Poussaka zal kunnen bewaard worden door de kleine Max en zijn zusje, als hun ouders zullen zijn omgekomen van ellende. Ik wilde aan die kinderen een adelsbrief geven van mijn hand. En in de tweede plaats, ik wil gelezen worden. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeroen. Our next reader is Sam Mchombo for Chichewa. Sam is the Associate Professor in the Department of African American Studies.
All right, let's see. Good evening, and let me see. Anyone speaks Swahili here? All right. I won't spare you that one. So, when I say hamjambo, let me hear everybody say hatujambo, right? So, I want to hear everybody say hatujambo. Let me hear that. Hatujambo. All right, so I'm going to greet you, and I want you to respond with that. Hamjambo. Oh, we are on. All right. Well, thank you very much, and good evening, and thanks to Claude for extending, this invitation. And you guys are going to be in for a treat. Dewulf asked me, says, "Are you going to introduce the poet?" I said, "I hadn't thought about it. I wrote the damn stuff." But anyway, the background to all this was that I got into linguistics from a political initiative by the first president of Malawi, who wanted to have his language, Chichewa, which had been made the national language, introduced at the university. And so, at that stage, when I was an undergraduate, they were looking for a candidate who could introduce that. And for some reason, I got identified. I'm not exactly sure what logic they used, and I got into linguistics and then got to pioneer, what was at the time Department of Chichewa and Linguistics is now Department of African Languages and Linguistics. In fact, some of the, about 4 or 5 of the students I taught are now professors, are there. And apart from teaching them, the basic stuff about the syntax, morphology, phonology, etc., and the linguistic structure of the language, I wanted to encourage them to engage in creative writing. My idea was, the criticism you're going to get is, you want to study Chichewa, where are the books? And my response was, the books won't come walking onto your shelf unless you sit down and write. So let's have it, let's get into that enterprise. And one of the areas was that of trying to get into poetry. And then there was another question, what constituted poetry in Chichewa? So I had a whole course, geared towards debunking the expectation that they're going to get there tadam, the iambic pentameter, the rhyme, and all that kind of stuff. And so as part of that course, we, got into understanding the agglutinative structure of the language, the phonology, the tones, what notes, the syllable structure, and say, now let's get busy. And then one final comment. At the time, the regime was really, really strict about anything that smacked of either, not exactly morally upright or politically acceptable, etc. And I told my students, I said, yeah, we're going to work under these oppressive conditions. If your poems get censored, you only have yourselves to blame. Poetry is supposed to have hidden meanings. Let people debate it. And so we're literally like young rebels. My students and I looked pretty much alike. I can imagine what I looked like then. That was way more than 35 years ago. But anyway, these poems, I wrote them. It was part of working with my students. And the first one, Kusutafodia, which means smoking. The inspiration was, I was in a bus and people were getting on the bus and I was looking out and there was this guy outside smoking. Not particularly fascinating, except that I felt he was a little too young to be smoking. And he was really tugging on that thing, his cheeks were going, So I from the bus I looked, I said, I don't smoke, but that guy seems to be really having a great time there. I wonder what he gets from that cigarette. So I said, let me put myself in his position. What is it like to be smoking? That's how I wrote that poem. It was really putting myself in the position of a smoker. All right. I'm going to move to other poetry, other poems. But one final thing, I presented this one publicly. And probably, the one poem a lot of people know me by in Malawi, up to the present day, was Surafodia. But the one thing that I want to share with you was, when it was presented publicly, the following day, I went to the market, and 4 kids, they're about, 10, 9, 11, about 4 of them, they saw me, and they all shouted, Kusutafodia! So I put up the car and jumped out. They all ran away. I said, hey, you, stop. So one kid said, oh, it's not me. It's those ones are the ones. I said, hey, what did they say? They said, Kusutafodia. I said, why? We heard you, read that, etc. I said, okay, come in. What's your name? Emmanuel. I had a copy in the car. I put out a copy and photographed it. Emmanuel, stay in school. Signed. Here. I got a copy! the following day, the secretary of the department said, "Did you promise some children a poem?" I said, "No." So some kids said you gave their friend a poem and that they were supposed to come to your office. I said, "Damn, those kids actually liked it. But now I hope you get to like it." So here we go. Kusuta Fordia. Kukhosi kukudyokola ngati kwa munthu wa ludzu. Inde limene linso ndi ludzu. Ludzu osati la madzi. Ludzu lofa ndi fodya. Tsono ndudu pafunika ije yayitali ndi yokoma ya msonga ya moto. Milomo bwino kutsekula pakatipo ndudu kutsomeka kuyiyamwa ndi kuyikama utsi woyera kumezera. Pang'ono-pang'ono ndudu ikutha, pang'ono-pang'ono nyota ikupita. Kudyokola konse kukumalizika uku ndiko kusuta fodya. All right. Next one. When I worked in Malawi, there was a river I used to go past to go to work and go back. And one day, the water was coming from a mountain, and we'd be crossing that. And one day I stopped there and I said, "Where does this river take all this water to?" And for no good reason, I decided, I'll write a poem about it. So the next one was really, for that river. This one was published. Mtsinje wokhota-khota, kungofanana ndi njoka. Kuchotsa madzi m'mapiri, kutulukira nawo padambo. Kuyenda nawo mokhota-khota, kukawatsira mnyanja. All right. And finally, I once had a girlfriend who was curious, "How do you get to write your poems? Where do you get?" I said, "It's easy." I said, "Well, you say so." I said, "Why, do you want me to write a poem for you?" She said, "Can you do that?" I said, "Well, that's where I show you that I love you, eh?" I said, "All right, I'll try that." I said, "I know you're kidding me." Well, that's the mirror, lol. So this one was actually written, it was published as well, and it was written, for her. And here's how it goes. Mtima suvala nsanza. Pokona iwe msungwana wotukwanitsa. Mtima ugalamuka, maso aphetira. Miyendo izizira, bongo fabwazi. Iwe ndiwe ndichiphazuwa. Polengedwa ngati timaphikidwa. Pa iwe mlengi, pa iwe msungwana mlengi. Usolonse ndi ufundi adayikapo. Udaphikidwadi, moto sudalumbe. Maso ako monga mpunga, awala ndi kunyezimira. Ndiyang'ana mkalilolemo. Sindingazule bowa mchilimwe. Asanteni sana, zikomo kwambiri. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Sam. The next reader is a colleague of mine in the library. Her name is Deborah Rudolph, and she is the curator for the C.V. Starr East Asian Library, and she will be reading in Chinese.
I'm going to be reading a passage from that section of Wire Zhao's translation of Alice in Wonderland, in which the Mock Turtle begins to tell Alice his story. I've chosen this passage because it contains a play on words that you'll be able to hear as I read. Wordplay, of course, nearly impossible, if not wholly impossible, to translate, but if you're translating Alice in Wonderland, you have no choice but to deal with it. The book's full of it. It provides much of the fun. It echoes the way a child like Alice might speak or understand what's spoken to her, and it adds to that ambiguity between the real and the imagined that lies at the heart of the book. The wordplay that you'll be hearing involves the nickname of the Mock Turtle, of his old schoolmaster. In Carol's original, that nickname is Tortoise, verb object, Tortoise. But the Mock Turtle has a Cockney accent, so it comes out tortoise. When Alice tries to ask about the name, the turtle becomes impatient and replies, look, we called him tortoise because he tortoise. Now, how can Zhao translate this into Chinese? He can't, of course. So he makes up another bit of wordplay that will make sense in Chinese, but which he can plug into the storyline. And in this case, he takes advantage of near homonyms, let's say tones in the language, to create this misunderstanding. Zhao's mock turtle recalls calling his old teacher Lao Wang, always forgetting. Alice, however, hears Lao Wang, old king. She tries to ask what kind of king he was. The turtle becomes angry and tells her, look, he was called always forgetting because he was always forgetting to come to class. You'll notice that Carol's nickname alludes to the fact that the teacher taught his charges. Zhao's nickname alludes to the fact that he didn't teach his charges. It's a little bit of antithetical parallelism that, of course, only the reader who has access to the original English can appreciate. It's also one of the simpler bits of wordplay that Zhao had to create for this translation. Here's the book. He had to create a couple dozen, maybe 3 dozen bits of wordplay. This is one of the simple ones. Some of the others are much more complex. They work on several different levels. They're just wonderful. My favorites, the way he translates the word snout, the way he deals with the names of the mock turtle, the Cheshire cat, the dormouse, also the way he handles the passage concerning the mouse's sad history. It really is a translation that is written for, let's say, that can be appreciated, not just by the reader who can't read Carol's original, but I think especially by the reader who can read Carol's original. Will have a greater appreciation of Zhao as a translator, but really will take more delight in the book, the passage.
到了后来，那苏小鱼长叹道：“哎，想当初我还是个真的混家样。”这2句说完了，又是半天不响，只听见有时候那过来方“哦咯咯，哦咯咯”的打冷嗝，和那苏小鱼不停的哭泣。奥丽丝几乎要站起来说：“先生，多些您讲您有趣的故事。”但是他觉得已经不会底下一点别的都没有的，所以他还是静坐着。又等了一大会儿。 那苏小鱼稍微镇定一点，但是哭也还有时候唏唏嘘嘘的哭。他接着道：“我们小的时候到海里去进学堂，我们的先生是个老脚鱼，我们总叫他老王。”奥丽丝问道：“他是个什么王？你们会叫他老王呢？”那苏小鱼怒道：“我们管这老脚鱼叫老王，因为他老忘记了教我们功课。你怎么这么笨？”那古来风也顺着说道：“你问到这么傻的话，羞也不怕的。” 说着，就和那苏小鱼静坐着，瞅着爱丽丝，使得他觉得恨不得钻到地底下去。到后来，那古来风对那苏小鱼道：“说下去啊，伙计，别整天的想啊。”他就接着说：“是啊，我们到海里去进学堂。虽然你也许不信有这事，但是……”爱丽丝插嘴道：“我又没有说我不信你。”那苏小鱼道：“你说的。”爱丽丝还没来得及回答。 那古来风就对他道：“你别多嘴啦。” Thanks.
Thanks, Deborah. Our next readers are both in the Armenian Studies program, Marinor Balouzian and Natalie Simonian. And they are, I just must say, they're missing their class tonight to be able to read here. So give them an extra round of applause.
Hi everyone, Parev Polorit. I want to start by giving a brief summary about Avedi Kisahagyan and Abulala Mahari. In 1909, Avedi Kisahagyan wrote the long narrative poem Abulala Mahari while he was in prison for engaging in anti-Tsarist revolutionary activities in Russia. The poem articulates a message of dissent through the voice of its eponymous hero, the Arab poet and philosopher Abu al-Allah al-Mahari. In the 9-part poem, Mahari renounces society and sets out on an endless spiritual journey, one that allows him to defy the human-imposed limitations on his thought and actions. Tonight, Natalie, Datev, Simonian, will read an abridged version of the 5th part of the poem. As you can see in the English translation of this section, Abulala Mahari exposes the hypocrisy of power and criticizes its role in the realms of the state, the law, morality, and society.
In Chen Gere, կրկնում է անդուլ զայրացած սրտումը Աբու Մահարին, ծոցիդ մեջ սևոց, մահիճդ պղծող, թռիր, քարավան ընկեր մտերիմ, եւ ուր որ կերթաս, այնտեղից նորեն գնա ու գնա, առանց հանգրվան, իմ բարի ճամփա, տար ինձ, կորցրու, չքվիմ, տանջանքս մարդիկ չիմանան, եւ ինչ ենք թողել, ինչ կա մեր ետև, որ մեզ պատրանքով ետ կանչեն օրից, փառք, գանձ, օրենքներ եւ իշխանություն, թռիր, հեռացիր բոլորից։ Եվ ինչ է փառքը։ Այսօր քեզ մարդիկ եղջյուրներից վեր կբարձրացնեն, վաղը նույն մարդիկ սմբակների տակ ջմլելու համար քեզ վար կնետեն։ Ինչ է պատիվը, հարգանքը մարդկանց, լոկ ոսկուց, վախից հարկ են մատուցում, իսկ երբ սայթաքես, մուջակիդ փոշին մեծ մարդ է դառնում եւ քեզ հարվածում։ Եվ ինչ է գանձը, որով հիմարը տիրում է մարդկանց եւ հանճար եւ սեր, բյուրավորների քամված արյունը, մերելների միս, որփի արցունքներ։ Եվ իրավունքը եւ օրենքները բոլոր զայրույթով ատում, գարշ իրավունքով բռնաբարում են եւ գարշ օրենքով լլկում ու մորթում։ 7 անգամ ահա ատում իշխանությունը, սերունդներ լափող, անհագ վաշխառու, անկուշ ձրիակեր, պատերազմների հավերժ հերյուրող։ Անցած դարերի, գալիք դարերի մեծ դահիճն է նա եւ մեծ նավազակ։ Իր անցած ուղին ոչիր ու նախճիր, սարսափներ վիժող, ոհակալ ոխմակ։ Նա հրեշի պես կրծքիս է նստել, բռունցքն է ահեղ սեղմել ճակատիս, եւ ամեն քայլի շղթա է զարկել, փականք է դրել լեզվիս ու մտքիս։ Նա փշրում է միշտ մեր ուսերը վար, ամենուր հասնում ճզմում է մարդուն, եւ իրավունքի դաժան անունով բյուր կարապներից բուրգեր է կերտում։ Եվ ամեն ինչ է իշխանությունը, իրավունք, օրենք եւ արդարություն, նա ինքն է խիղճը եւ չարն ու բարին, իսկ դու գերեզման, դու ոչնչություն։ Եվ նզովում եմ իշխանությունը, հազարաճիրան մոլի բորենին, իր ամեն քայլը արյունի հնձան, ուր տրորում է ծերին, մանուկին։ Ապիկար մարդիկ, ստրուկ ու վախկոտ, ով տվեց սուրը նմանի ձեռին, ով տվեց նրան վրեժի իրավունք, իշխել, խոխողել իր նմաններին։ Տար ինձ քարավան, իժերին հանձնիր, թաղիր հեքսիրտս ավազների տակ, տար ինձ, ազատիր իշխանությունից, ազատիր նրա խովանուց վայրակ։ Խոլ կայծակները հրեղեն սրով ծվատում էին վաշտերն ամպերի, եւ արշավասույր փշրվում էին ջերմակ բաշերին հեռու լեռների, եւ մրիկները մռնչում էին, արմավն ու նոճին շաչում, շառաչում, եւ քարավանը կամուրջ քանդելով ու քարատրոպ վազում էր, թռչում։ Վազում էր, թռչում, զրնգ հազրնգ, փոշու ամպերով ծածկելով ճամփեն, ասես, փախչում էր չար իշխանության քինոտ բռունցքից, որ չհասնի իրեն։ Thank you very much.
Okay, our next reader is Emilie Bergmann. I didn't see Emilie come in, so I was a little nervous. I had to stand up. Emilie is professor in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, and she will be reading Spanish.
Okay. I'm going to read excerpts from 2 poems by Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, the greatest pre-independence poet and the first feminist of the Americas, was born in Mexico, in Nepantla, a place whose name in Nahuatl, according to Chicana writer Gloria Anzaldúa, means the threshold of transformation, an in-between state. Nepantla is that uncertain terrain one crosses when traveling from the present identity into a new identity. Sor Juana grew up with Nahuatl and Castilian and taught herself Latin. Her most significant poem is her long philosophical poem, Primero Sueño, First Dream, in which the mind dares to explore the cosmos from the macrocosmic movement of the moon and stars to the microcosmic activity of the organs of the human body. A common approach to Sor Juana's work has been silence. how little we actually know about her life, in particular the final years in which she wrote hardly anything, following the boldness of her critique of a sermon by a prestigious cleric, when a superior, the Bishop of Puebla, in dressing in drag as a nun, published Sor Juana's critique along with his stern admonishment for her cheekiness. She wrote a defense of her right to an intellectual life, the Respuesta a Sor Filotea, the response to Sister Filotea, in which she deploys ironic references to silence and speech. The narrative that dominates many studies of Sor Juana is tragic. A brilliant woman crushed by patriarchal authority, a Mexican genius silenced by the colonizing Spanish church, despite the 3 volumes of poetry, prose, and theater published in 1689, 1692, and posthumously in 1703, after her death in 1695 during an epidemic. In the 2 selections I've chosen, however, her lyrical gifts of versification, her ironic wit, speak dramatically. In both, she riffs on the traditional 8-syllable form of the Spanish ballad. The first one is a poem that's been memorized by generations of Mexican school children. Hombres necios que acusáis a la mujer sin razón, sin ver que sois la ocasión de lo mismo que culpáis. Si con ansia sin igual solicitáis su desdén, ¿por qué queréis que obren bien si las incitáis al mal? Combatís su resistencia y luego, con gravedad, decís que fue liviandad lo que hizo la diligencia. Parece quiere el denuedo de vuestro parecer loco al niño que pone el coco y luego le tiene miedo. ¿Qué humor puede ser más raro que el que, falto de consejo, él mismo empaña el espejo y siente que no esté claro? ¿O cuál es de más culpar, aunque cualquiera mal haga, la que peca por la paga o el que paga por pecar? Pues, ¿para qué os espantáis de la culpa que tenéis? Queredlas cual las hacéis, o hacedlas cual las buscáis. Bien con muchas armas fundo que lidia vuestra arrogancia, pues en promesa e instancia juntáis diablo, carne y mundo. The very terms that the church used to condemn women. Spanish, and my second selection is the Romance decasílabo. Spanish poetics, unlike English, is based on syllable count rather than feet. But we can see in the Romance decasílabo, a 10-syllable ballad, that Sor Juana uses the dactyl as a rhythmic unit that kicks off each line with a rhythmic triplet, 1, 2, 3. It's a dance. You can dance to this. 1 stressed syllable followed by 2 unstressed. In Spanish prosody, the term for this group of syllables is the esdrújulo, and Sor Juana uses that term. It conveys a certain highfalutin tone. The translator, Amanda Powell, has managed to render in English the lightness of the rhythm with dactyls in English, and her translation is also remarkable for bringing out both the sensuality of the poet's praise of the physical beauty of her patroness, the Countess of Paredes. And I noticed that, well, this was the aspect of the poem that I focused on, the eroticism of the poem, in my earliest reading of this Romance decasílabo. And only after hearing the poem recited in a stage performance by actress Ofelia Medina in Mexico City, I recognized the playfulness of the dance rhythm. The link between physical attributes and intellectual edification is an obvious feature of this praise of the woman's beauty. But Powell reveals the rather sly reference to the cheeks of schoolboys that were a traditional locus of instruction in pre-modern Latin classrooms. So, Lámina sirve el cielo al retrato lícida de su angélica forma. Cálamos forma el sol de sus luces, sílabas las estrellas componga, cátedras de abril tus mejillas clásicas dan a mayo estudiosas, métodos a jazmines nevados, fórmula rubicunda a las rosas, lágrimas de la aurora congela búcaro de fragancia tu boca, rúbrica con jazmines escritas, cláusula de coral y de aljófar. Tránsito a los jardines de Venus, órgano es de marfil, encanora música tu garganta que en dulces éxtasis, aún al viento aprisiona. Pámpanos de cristal y de nieve, cándidos, tus dos brazos provocan. Tántalos los deseos ayunos míseros sienten frutas y ondas. Dátiles de alabastro tus dedos, fértiles de tus dos palmas brotan frígidos si los ojos los miran, cálidos si las almas los tocan. Móviles pequeñeces tus plantas, sólidos pavimentos ignoran, mágicos que a los vientos que pisan tósigos de beldad impresionan. Plátano, not banana here, but tree. Tu gentil estatura, flámula es que a los aires tremola. Ágiles movimientos que esparcen bálsamo de fragantes aromas. Índices de tu rara hermosura, rústicas estas líneas son cortas. Cítara, solamente de Apolo, méritos, cante tuyos, sonora. So, here are playful examples of the intellectual sophistication inextricable from the poetry in Castilian, which in Sor Juana's time was known as for its cleverness and wit. Thank you.
And our next and final reader is Robert Goldman, who will be reading, chanting, singing in Sanskrit. Robert is the Catherine and William L. Magistretti Distinguished Professor in the Department of South and Southeast Asian Studies.
Vidvadbhyo Sadaram Namo Namaha. I offer respectful homage to the learned community here, as one might say in Sanskrit. And I hope you'll forgive me, I have a little bit of a cold, and I think Yael will know what I mean when I say I have a verhagete Stimme, as my grandmother used to say. This is not Sanskrit. I'm going to be reciting, as Claude says, and thank you very much, Claude, for organizing this fabulous event, a relatively short passage from a very influential, very important ancient Sanskrit epic poem known as the Valmiki Ramayana. That is the career of Lord Rama as narrated by the great sage and first poet, according to the Indian tradition, Valmiki, who was a seer, a sage, and a poet, and created the genre of poetry, according to the Indian aesthetic tradition. So that sage, whose birthday is still celebrated today, is known as the Adi Kavi, the first poet, and his poem, the Ramayana, the Adi Kavya. It's a rather long poem at 50,000 lines of Sanskrit text, but one must understand that it's by far the shorter of the two Sanskrit epics, about 1/4 the length of its cousin, the Mahabharata, sometimes referred to as the world's longest poem. So I will read the shorter version of that. If you have the time this evening, I'll read off 50,000 lines. Maybe not. This is a text of approximately the middle of the first millennium before the Common Era, and it has a huge impact on the culture and civilization, not just of India, but of all of South and Southeast Asia, ranging from what would be today Afghanistan in the west to the Philippines, Bali, and so on in the east, from Mongolia to Sri Lanka in the south. It's not only a poem, It's an important religious text which recites the heroic life of the great incarnation of the Supreme Lord, Hindu Lord Vishnu, Lord Rama, and his beloved wife Sita, and tells their sometimes tragic tale. I'll be reciting about 12 verses or so from the 5th book, the Sundarakanda of the Valmiki Ramayana, as published by as a critical edition of the text by the scholars at the Oriental Institute of Baroda in Gujarat, India. The translation, which if you care to follow along, was done by myself and my collaborator, Dr. Sally Sutherland Goldman, who's the senior lecturer in Sanskrit at the Department of South and Southeast Asian Studies. The passage is in a slightly longer meter than the normal workhorse narrative meter of much Sanskrit poetry, and other Sanskrit texts that are very prosaic are also often composed in this text called shloka, this meter, which is a verse form of 4 equal quarters of 8 syllables each, or 32 syllables, recited, say, in a South Indian style. From the Ramayana, it would sound something like this. Bhuya eva mahatejaha hanuman varutatmajaha abravit prashritam vakyam. Right? Sita pratyaya karanata. That's a shloka meter, as it's called, 32 syllables. The passage I'm reading this evening is in a slightly longer meter, one of the longer meters which tend in the epic to be more ornate, more highly figured than that I just recited. This is called the Trishtub meter or an Upajati meter. It consists of 4 equal quarters of 11 syllables each. And this particular passage is a little bit unusual because it's rhymed. The quarter verses rhyme with each other, which is not particularly common in the epic. The scene I'm going to read occurs early in the 5th book of the epic, when the great monkey divinity, Lord Hanuman, son of the wind god, has flown across the ocean to the magic enchanted island of Lanka to search for the abducted heroine of the epic, Sita, who's being kept prisoner by the evil demon king, the Rakshasa king, Ravana. And he searches all over the island. And this scene is kind of, we think, is rather charming, in which Hanuman watches the moon rise over the golden, magical city of Lanka. Again, excuse the voice. Tatassaha madhyamanam shumantam jyotsnabivitanam mahadvamantam dadarshadiman divibhanumantam koshte vrisham mattamiva pramantam lokasya papani vinashayantam mahodadim chapi samedayantam bhutani sarvani virajayantam tadarshashitam chumathabhiyantam ya bhati lakshmir bhuvi mandarastha tata pradosheshu cha sagarastha tataiva toyeshu cha pushkarastha rajasa charunishakarastha hamso yata rajata panjarastha simho yata karmandarakandarastha viro yata garvita kunjarastha chandropi bhabrajata tambarastha stitakka kudmaniva tikshna shringo hastiva jambunada baddha shringo vibhati chandra paripurna shringa madhachala sveta evachachinga prakasha chandrodaya nashta dosha pravriddha raksha pishitasha dosha rama birame rita chitta dosha swarga prakasho bhagavan pradosha tantri swanakarna sukha pravritta swapanti narya patibhi suvritta naktancharaschyapi tata pravritta vihartum udbhutam raudravritta mataprataptani samakulani, ratashva bhadrasana sankulani, virashriya chapi mahakulani, dadarsha shriman kapi kukulani, parasparam chadikamakshipanti, bhujanscha pina nidiknikshapanti, matapralapadini vikshapanti, matani chanyonyamati kshipanti. Om Sadaram Namo Namaha.
Okay, our next speaker is Rick Kern, who is the co-sponsor in the exhibit and in the reception. He is the director of the Berkeley Language Center, who probably everyone here knows that. And he's also a professor in the Department of French.
Thank you very much, Claude. And I just wanted to let people know, if you want to just stand up just for a moment to get the blood going, that's fine. I'm going to, first of all, thank Claude, as well as Aisha Hamilton, and all of the librarians who have put together this important exhibit showcasing the linguistic diversity of our libraries and the scholars who use it, and a special thanks to all of the readers who have just given this wonderful trip around the world in languages. It's an honor to present our featured speaker this evening. Judith Butler is Maxine Elliott Professor in the Department of Comparative Literature in the Critical Theory program, a renowned philosopher who can claim household name status. Judith Butler has been extraordinarily influential in a wide range of fields, including political philosophy, ethics, literary criticism, feminism, gender and sexuality, queer theory, and critical theory. She is also the current president of the Modern Language Association, making her the ideal person to address all of us gathering tonight to celebrate the library's Languages of Berkeley exhibit. Judith Butler is the author of many groundbreaking books, and I will cite only a few here, such as Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity, published in 1990, Bodies That Matter, On the Discursive Limits of Sex, published in 1993, Excitable Speech, from 1997, Who Sings the Nation State? Language, Politics, and Belonging, co-authored with Gayatri Spivak in 2008, and recently, Senses of the Subject and Notes Toward a Performative Theory of Assembly, both published in 2015. Her current projects include work on messianic gestures in Kafka and Benjamin, philosophical fictions in Freud's work, and gender in translation. Judith Butler has received numerous awards and academic honors, including the Theodore W. Adorno Prize from the city of Frankfurt, the Brudner Prize for Lifetime Achievement in LGBT Studies from Yale University, and the Andrew Mellon Award for Distinguished Academic Achievement in the Humanities. The French Ministry of Culture has named her a Chevalier dans l'Ordre des Arts et Lettres, and the British Academy has named her a Corresponding Fellow. A longtime activist in gender and sexual politics, human rights, and anti-war politics, Professor Butler is now, as president of the MLA, the lead advocate for languages in the US. She is here this evening to talk to us about the promise of multilingualism. Please welcome Professor Judith Butler.
Wonderful. I'm very pleased to be here this evening. And thank you for the introduction, Rick. During such dark and uncertain times, it's a pleasure and an honor to take this occasion to affirm how lucky we are to be part of a public university where more than 60 languages at any given moment are being taught in one corner of the university or another. It would be a great achievement and something of a wonder to simply stand here and name all those languages.
We've heard from some of them already today, and I thank you so much for your wonderful readings. I note that it's especially important during these difficult times rife with xenophobia and nationalism, to affirm the multilingual university because, as we know, the calls for obligatory monolingualism at the state and local level in many places in this country, but also now in the post-Brexit UK, reflect a narrow idea of national identity and undercut the many values of multilingualism, including the complex view of the world, broad and textured, that it provides. In a way, all of our senses are inflected differently depending on the language through which we approach the world. And by that, I don't mean to say that we each, according to the language we speak, approach the world in a way that cannot be shared. On the contrary, the public university at its best is the site where this encounter among languages takes place, one that both deepens our sense of local cultures and broadens our understanding of a complex world. In the 27 years that I have taught at UC Berkeley, I've been amazed to walk through the campus and hear any number of languages spoken at the same time. This has never been an experience of chaos or dislocation. Multilingualism is our location, and it means that we never assume that one language holds the truth over any other. At UC Berkeley, and in this library in particular, in language courses and literature and history courses, students and faculty alike understand themselves to be part of an ongoing multilingual experiment, one that brings with it different histories and cultures, different ways of understanding the social world, but also, for some of us for whom English is a first language, a promising experience of feeling that the assumption that English is at the center of the world has been productively challenged here. You might think, well, English has established itself as a lingua franca, no matter how paradoxical that sounds, and one cannot get far, we could say, without having English these days. But that's only to describe the power that English has achieved. It doesn't describe the reality to which it lays claim. If we were only to work in English, we would misunderstand our world. Monolingualism keeps us parochial, even if the language we speak has achieved global dominance. At UC Berkeley, I found it especially interesting to meet students over the years who were explicitly asked by their parents not to learn their heritage language at home, to speak only English, since English was considered the ticket to assimilation and success. The idea that a monolingual education would help second-generation children in this country is understandable, and yet it misses the great promise of multilingualism in this world to counter the ignorance and fear that thwart our understanding of each other and the complexity of our world. But there's more. One of the first moves on the part of many of those second-generation students upon arriving on the UC Berkeley campus is to dart over to literature and language classes to learn their own heritage language. That was a longing, apparently, that no education in monolingualism could extinguish. And in departments like comparative literature, where I live, we find time and again that the student who learns their heritage language comes to appreciate the various elements of language learning and goes on to learn yet another language, often graduating with competence in, say, 4 or even 5 languages. It's one thing to speak with your grandparents in Mandarin or in Spanish, or indeed in Yiddish, as I was asked to do, but quite another to learn the poetry and prose written over centuries in those languages, and to construct an essay in that very language which represents the full force of your intellectual powers. My wager is that many parents feared that a child would be confused if they were to speak and hear more than one language at home or learn more than one language at school. Research shows that that is not true, and that what is true is that moving between languages builds a facility to shift between syntax and framework, to move between worlds of meaning, and to consider more knowledgeably the very different perspectives on the world that are generated through different languages. Perhaps a second misconception is that employers and universities will not value bilingualism or multilingualism. but what could be more valuable? Fields committed to translation and to multilingualism are more inclusive and stand to benefit from that range of perspectives. Monolingualism, on the other hand, limits the number of regions that can participate in a field and so restricts the contribution to knowledge itself. Take, for example, one of my own fields, gender studies. I came to see over time that scholars working in Anglophone regions assumed that if they could clarify a concept in English, that the concept was therefore clarified once and for all, and that it had a general applicability, even a presumption of universality. But that has turned out to be a dangerous habit of cultural imperialism. Such a view reminds me of a French scholar I once met who confessed that she regarded any foreigner who made a grammatical error in French as an irrational person, as somebody incapable of rationality. She thought that French grammar was the structure of thought itself and could be universalized. An imperial presumption, to be sure. My wager is that lesser-known languages do not make that presumption. There is no one language that refers to objects, for instance, more fully and completely than any other. No one language monopolizes the referent, just as no one mode of representation, no one medium truly grasps the nature of gender where others fail. Gender as an English term arrives only with great difficulty in languages other than English. There is resistance, coinage, refusal, assimilation, but almost always the term itself causes, well, some trouble. So if we refer to gender as a noun, a category that you check, or the kind of being you think you are, we're already making all sorts of presumptions that don't translate easily. The proliferation of noun forms for both gender and sexual identity raise specific problems for translation in, say, Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. Consider, for instance, that there's no noun form for gender in Japanese. There are terms for women and for men, but not for the concept of gender itself. Indeed, in Japanese linguistic self-reference takes place through inflection. The terms ore and boku are informal ways of referring to the first-person singular I of a man, while atashi and watashi are first-person references for a woman. The use of each of these terms, however, is inflected by social class, educational background, cultural conventions, and importantly, the relation to the one who is addressed by that speech act. Although what in English we would simply call gender, or some of us would, operates in complex ways, implicated in formal and social modes of address, coordinated by power, in Japanese the complexity at work is not designated by an equivalent term. The closest Japanese gets to approaching this non-translatable word is a coinage, genda, which is not unlike the French coinage gender, by seeking a phonetic echo with gender. In German, one sometimes uses the term Sozialgeschlecht, social sex, and in Chinese, that also emerges as one possibility. And as I understand the challenge of translating gender into Chinese, it has involved coming up with a conjunction of phonemes and numbers. The term for gender is Jing 4 Bei 2. The numbers denote tones, and there are 4 of them for each of the 2 terms. Thus, Jing 2 means something very different than Jing 4. Indeed, this Roman system that I'm using is already a translation of Chinese characters, so makes something of a grid out of a graphic sign. Jing 4 is a term meaning category or kind, but it also means sex, and so sustains a relation with those languages like German that link sex to species. Some feminist scholars in China put the term social, and here just pardon my pronunciation, Shih 4, Hui 4, before the term Jing 4, Bei 2. Bei 2 means difference, thus linking with those formulations of gender, linking it to a kind of sexual difference that wavers at best between the biological and the social. It would seem that gender theory can only benefit from a multilingual understanding of the ways that gender as a term does not work in every context, in fact, sometimes remains fully untranslatable. Rather than assimilate those linguistic differences into English, Should we not approach gender theory as a practice of translation, a necessary translation in order to counteract the imperial gesture of assimilation into English, which is accompanied by the presumption that anything clarified in English is therefore clarified for the world? Indeed, in this world, irreversibly multilingual as it is, there can be no gender without translation, and where the term gender is non-translatable, another lexicon, or indeed another syntax is called for. And that is truly interesting. At least I think so. Multilingualism provides, I would suggest, a horizon for our teaching and our research, not just because we come from different linguistic backgrounds, but because the knowledge of our world is built through the encounter. Indeed, a university that supports instruction in foreign languages helps to build that more complex and capacious understanding of our world. And a library that preserves and purchases foreign language texts and publications support those fields and lets all of us benefit from literature, philosophy, history, scholarship from every field, from the history of world cultures and global forms of knowledge in the plural. I don't know if plural is really the right word. Should we think of the world as a cultural or linguistic plurality? Well, that model tends to keep languages distinct side by side. But what about the encounters between languages, contact made, and transformations that take place as a consequence of those encounters, whether through translation or interpretation? Languages affect, change, and alter one another. They bear the traces of past encounters and confrontations, wars, and histories of cohabitation. They carry the histories of colonialism, resistance, revolution, and new beginnings. I remember a bad moment in this country's history when the younger President Bush was criticizing the socialist government then in power in France, and he announced that the French did not even have a word for entrepreneur. He said it. I can't imitate the way he pronounced it, but okay. I thought it was a sublime joke. I was ready. I thought, he was joking. Sometimes he did joke, and maybe it is now, but at the time it was radically unfunny. I say this because a certain imperial smugness goes along with monolingualism. It keeps one, arrogantly centered in one's own world, but also, in the case of English, it allows one to presume that whatever is said in English is simply said, that its truth and validity, its applicability, is to be presumed as globally true. In one course I taught, we read Rousseau on the origin of languages. At one point, he argues that words, he has many inconsistent accounts in that book, so this is just one strain. He accounts that words emerge for humans through imitating the sounds of animals, or rather that human sounds, especially in their most passionate forms, are indistinguishable from those of animals. Those so-called natural sounds, which are not yet words, he tells us, are composed of accents, pure accents without consonants. Only when the hard edge of consonants are articulated do sounds start to verge on words and we become capable of speech. He insists that natural sounds not only emerge from passion, but that they imitate passion. And if we want to know what the sounds of passion are, they would emerge from the throat. They would be accented vowels, I presume, and inarticulate sound in his words, that is to say, sounds that are not yet speech. On that same page, he mentions onomatopoetic expressions which sound like the thing to which they refer. The words give the impression of being derived from what they describe. So when we say in English that a cat says meow, we think that this term truly resembles what a cat says, that the word simply registers the actual sound that the cats make. If Rousseau is right here, the onomatopoetic phrase shows that some forms of language stay proximate to nature, and that they imitate or correspond to sounds that exist before, merely bringing those sounds into an articulation. But is he actually right? And is his argument wrong because he subscribes to a form of monolingualism that fails to consider the various ways that language works? For instance, does the sound meow resemble what the cat actually says? Or is it a conventional way of naming the cat's sound, one that comes to structure and frame the acoustic possibilities for hearing the cat? If meow does not resemble the cat necessarily, then it may be that the word, the convention, structures our hearing and interprets the sounds that we receive from the cat. To test this thesis, let me ask a few questions of you, especially all of you who have spoken here today. What do cats say in your language? Any more? Mao? Louder? Oh, that's a good one. Others? Male. Okay, well we have some changes, right? At least we had some. I had 16 languages represented in that particular classroom, and there were some true distinctions to be made. My presumption is that you were probably led to believe that the word by which you name that sound is the same as the sound the cat makes, or pretty nearly the same. My local experiment is meant to make an old argument, one that we find in the Tower of Babel itself. There are many languages, and if we seek to construct a single language that absorbs and overcomes linguistic difference, we deny something quite fundamental about the world in which we live. Monolingualism can be a parochial position, one that affirms that the language spoken is one of many, but the only one that is valuable to speak. Or it can so overinflate that value that it becomes a position that asserts the dominance of that one language over all others. But if the multiplicity of languages is inevitable and irreversible, where does that leave us? Well, where it leaves us is, I think, with a sense that our languages structure reality differently, and we can, through the act of translation, understand something of that difference and traverse that difference to some important degree. I would also suggest that it drops us off right here at UC Berkeley. At least on this campus, as I've experienced it, we have the chance, especially through learning languages and literatures, to build a different sense of the world, one in which we all experience a certain dislocation and enriching humility by finding ourselves less capable in another language than we are in the primary one that we speak, if we have a primary one. We become, as it were, children together as we start to learn a new language. It's embarrassing. We make terrible errors. We become children again. Errancy is the name of that game, and only those who are willing temporarily to seem like fools have a chance to learn another language. It feels like being an infant all over again, and we try to make this sound and that sound when everything in the mouth strains to go in another direction. It is as if a new language remakes the mouth, the tongue, the throat. And those of you who've taught languages know that you sometimes have to get people to use a part of their body that they've never exercised before. Yes, we presume English in most of our classrooms, but not in all, and English is never presumed to be the only language spoken on campus. When states and localities seek to outlaw the speaking of foreign languages, they not only demand a conformity to English, I'm going to say that because the UK is doing it in a post-Brexit frenzy, and we know that the US has done it as well, but they seek to silence those whose first language is Spanish or Arabic or Turkish or Japanese. In other words, they seek to deny the multilinguistic character of the nation and its borders, its history and its future. And in suppressing the sounds of those languages, it seeks to deny the reality of those histories and an enduring fact of a multicultural population that challenges the false and dangerous idea of a nation purified of what is foreign. During times of extreme and intensifying xenophobia, it is most important to remember that English is not the center of the world, even if it often assumes that it is. This world has, in fact, many centers, and what seems like the periphery from one perspective is the very place of enduring life, lived seen from afar. Oddly enough, the same can be said about first languages and foreign languages. For many of us at UC Berkeley, English is a foreign language. Yet each and every one of us speaks a language that is foreign to someone else. So what we call our own language is always relative. We all speak a foreign language. The language we speak is foreign to someone. So we could say that every language is a foreign language to someone. And in this world, we cannot presume that the language we speak is everyone's language. That imperial presumption works through censorship and suppression by banning spoken Spanish in the US or by excluding the foreign and the foreigner, travel bans, and racist migration and asylum policies. And during these times when xenophobia, the fear of foreigners, of the foreign, educational institutions have an ethical and educational obligation to dispel prejudice, foster equality, and produce the libraries and classrooms that give us all the opportunity to resist that lethal contagion. We need these places, these resources, in order to stop and think and analyze, to take apart those forms of cultural and national arrogance that propagate hatred and fear. In learning another language, we practice humility in an effort to gain knowledge and to live in a broader world, one that exceeds the national boundaries that too often divide us. That passage through humility gives us greater capacity to live and think within a multilingual world, to shift from one way of knowing to another. At least here, at least potentially, what we call the foreign is actually the medium in which we live together, the enigmatic basis of our worldly connection with one another. The foreign is our work, if not our vocation, since we are expanding our understanding of the world's history and culture as we come to know and affirm the multilingual expanse of this world, which is its promise to move beyond and against the kinds of nationalism that make our borders sites of violent suffering. It may not be that multilingualism alone promises an alternative to violence, but it can challenge arrogance and nationalism. It can cultivate humility and understanding. And those public virtues are not the ones we see on display on this sad day in our country. For that reason, on this very day, we are lucky to be here, affirming another vision of a world, another promise. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Judith. So this concludes the formal part of the reception. Thank you all for coming. I invite you all to have a refreshment. We're going to turn on a little music, not too loud. People are studying upstairs. And I encourage you to chat with a contributor of the exhibit. We're all wearing gold name tags. Thank you very much.